So welcome to another Code Untapped Tech podcast. You've got me, Ez, and we've got Jason. Say hello, mate.
Hey guys, how's it going? Good stuff.
Yeah, so
I know you can't feedback to me,
they
but
can't really. So some people might see us because you can watch us on YouTube, but I think a lot of people are probably listening to us on Spotify. I think we're on Apple and a whole bunch of different things at the moment. SoundCloud, everywhere. It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. But anyway, how you doing, Jay?
I'm good. Just busy, Ez. Just busy. It's mental at the moment. Mental.
I mean, what's it they say? If you want to get something done, give it to a busy person. So that must mean you're getting a lot of stuff done at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Ez, we're just about to open our funding round, our first funding round, just a small round. Yeah. So just busy doing all of the paperwork around that, the SEIS assurance.
To be clear, that's for Yome, not for Code Untapped. So Yome,
not for Code Untapped. This is for Yome. Yeah. So all things like SEI insurance, the data room preparation, making sure that the pitch is correct. The deck is correct, and all of those things, and doing that whilst keeping the platform lights on the platform as well, and pushing out changes on the platform as well. So it's quite difficult. And speaking to investors, and also, talking to prospective new hires and stuff as well. So there's a lot going on in this space. Yeah.
Right. Well, you know what? That reminds me. So I think our next talk we're going to be doing on fundraising with Andy Davis, who's a good friend. And but given everything you're going through, we should definitely do a talk on what it takes to actually start a funding process. Right. I mean, that's a big black box for a lot of people. They don't really know what it means, what you've got to cover, and all the things that you've had to go through over the last few weeks. So we won't talk about that today, but that's definitely place. That's definitely going to come up. But today, I think, the subject today, incubators versus accelerators. And I think this is a subject that's starting to come up for you now. So, and I know I've touched on it with you, whether or not you should be in an incubator or an accelerator. What are your thoughts at the moment? Have you thought about this? Is it something you want to do?
Well, it's interesting because initially I was when we were building out the initial prototype and the first MVP of Yome, we weren't in an incubator or an accelerator. I didn't really know what they did or what they meant, to be honest. And we were just building stuff in isolation, and we were just like, focus, head down, let's just get this stuff out. But looking back, I think that I missed out on an opportunity to learn a lot. I think, so I'm going to ask you about incubators and accelerators, because I want to know, the differences and when you should, depending on the stage you are in your in your growth as a startup, which one you should go for and stuff like that. But I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of, there's a bunch of people or bunch of companies all at the same sort of stage, trying to build stuff, and I think just having that camaraderie around what you're doing, how to position yourself, what are your visions. And it's interesting because you might have a vision for your product or service, but other people look at it and just see something else. And they can just throw a different light on what you're doing. And obviously that, not to be swayed from what you're doing, but just to have that different perspective, I think is valuable. And so for me, with Yome, I think I missed out on not having that interaction with other startups going along the same journey. And I think it would have been invaluable for me. Would have been really invaluable for me. But so just pushing it, but because this is really your space, as you know a lot about this. So what so first of all, just tell me the differences. Just talk about the differences between incubators and accelerators first, before we get into, what stage you need to be at before you go.
Well, I think, it's a concept that really confuses people, because they're really similar, really, on the face of it. Both incubators and accelerators support early stage startups from different stages, give them access to various resources, guidance, and help them raise funding in some way, shape, or form, right? So on the face of it, people are, well, what's the difference? They're the same, right? Well, fundamentally, if we look at an accelerator, the purpose of an accelerator is to help founders, typically with an existing startup, who demonstrate some potential for rapid growth, who with the appropriate support, advice, training, and mentoring will be able to develop their startup to the next stage, go to market, raise funding, and explode, right? So typically an accelerator operates with cohorts. They'll operate within a certain time frame, usually 3 to 6 months. And then what they will do, they'll run some type of selection process where they will select startups to join those cohorts within their accelerators. They will then support them for 3 to 6 months with mentoring, advice, guidance, access to clients, and the rest, to get them from where they are today to the point that they have a product that they can actually push into the market and are getting early traction. And then typically there's some form of demo day where they will then help those startups get early stage funding from other investors. And usually they'll take, they may put some equity into, they may put some capital into the startup in return for equity. It might be that they just get paid a fee for doing this, but that's typically the model, how it works. So we're talking about established startups, need help getting to the next level, join in a cohort, usually through some selection process, 3 to 6 months with established help and support, and then fundraising at the end of that process, right? So a typical accelerator that everyone's probably heard of is Y Combinator, right? Y Combinator works exactly this model. They take on a cohort, you're in that program for, I think it's 3 months. Y Combinator puts money into your startup in return for 7%. It's varied over the years. It was originally 20 grand, and it was 120, then it was 330. Now I think they're talking about 500,000 going into these companies in return for 7%. They'll do a whole bunch of coaching with you over the next 3 months to really get you investor ready. And then you'll have a demo day where other investors will look to invest into your company. And that's a typical accelerator model. So what is an incubator? So, well, the clue's in the name, right? So very much like, incubators are used for newborn babies, right? An incubator takes founders, usually recruits founders who may not have an idea, or they might have the inception of an idea, and they will bring them together with their own resources to help them take that idea from literally a PowerPoint to actual first product. Now, this isn't always done. It tends to not be cohort based. So they'll take them on as and when they can, right? And they'll help develop them to a certain stage. Obviously, they'll take some form of either a fee or percent or ownership of that organization. And the whole point is they will help develop you over time. There is no kind of, here's our pitch day session, we're only with you for 3 to 6 months. It will be whatever their time frame is, which they typically like to support these startups. So some well-known incubators who operate in that model tend to be more your Founders Factory, Blenheim Chalcott or another one. Zinc VC operate in a similar way to that as well. Enterprise First acts more in, Enterprise First acts in that fashion. They're kind of a cross between your incubator and accelerator model, but they definitely like to grow these startups throughout cohorts. So really it comes down to stage, it comes down to how developed the startup is. Is the organization, whether it's an incubator and accelerator, trying to grow you or just trying to get you to the next stage so you get funding, right? And as I said, often with the incubator model, it might be that you don't even come in with the idea, you're just a great founder who is then recruited to build these startups, which is when we start to think more about the kind of venture builder type models as well. So there you go. There's a bit of a description between how the two models work and how they differ.
I think the question for me would be, you use the term established, yeah. So could you just drill down into that? Because I mean, there's that sounds so vague. because established can mean so much things, you know. I mean, established can mean, right, you've raised seed funding, or it can mean, you know, you've built a product, or it means that, you know, you've got channel partners or something, but you haven't built a product. It can mean lots of stuff. So in your mind, what does it really mean to sort of approach an accelerator and say, right, you know, I'm an established startup? What does that really mean?
Well, that's the problem. It can mean multiple things, right? Because YC, they're an accelerator, but you can join YC with just a pitch deck. Right? Pitch deck and a team. You do need a team, but you do need a pitch. But you don't have to have a product yet. You just have to have the idea, and you have to set up your company, right? So you have to be incorporated, and you have to, you know, have a very strong vision for what you want to build. That's really key. Have to have a strong vision for what, as you know, you've applied for YC.
Right? They rejected me as the
but you know, you got him right the last minute. So it wasn't really. I don't know. I wasn't really surprised. So. And then you've got organisations like TechNation. TechNation have an accelerator program as well, a very well established one. And typically, to join the TechNation program, you have to, you know, at least on your first round, right, of fundraising. So you've probably done a pre-seed round, and you're now looking for seed round funding. And you've got a team together, you've got a vision, you've probably got the first version of your product as well. You might not have traction, but still very early stage. So they're more seed level companies. So they're both accelerators, but ready or established can mean quite different things based off those two.
And then in terms of what does it look like in terms of from a percentage wise? So you say you've got 100 startups, what would be on average, what would be the percentage of, you know, startups getting into an established accelerator? So something like TechNation or something like YC, you know.
I'm not sure I could answer that one. I don't know what the rate of joining is. I mean, if you consider the size of these cohorts versus the total population of startups,
it's going to be very small, isn't it?
It's going to be small, right? It's going to be very, very small. The more interesting fact is that the success rate for accelerators. So startups that join an accelerator and then go on to successfully, you know, grow to a big exit, whatever. It's about 14%, right? So it's not high. So even joining an accelerator isn't a guarantee of success, but it does give you advantages that you wouldn't have before, right? You have your peers around you. You're in a group of other startups. You've got access to guidance and advice. You get put in front of a room full of investors whose goal it is to invest, right? So it removes a lot of those barriers. And also that YC, for example, acts as almost a reference for you. The fact that you're in the YC accelerator says, well, okay, there must be something about you guys. So you've almost removed one of the biggest problems for investors, which is that element of doubt. Can these guys really do what they say they do? Are they the right team? Should I be thinking about them? Should I focus on another organization? But by being in that room, it's kind of like, okay, tick. You know, someone's already said these guys are solid, right? So, or this team is solid. Sorry, I always use the term guys. It's really bad. I try not to. Sorry, I got a little bit distracted.
Yes, I'm thinking, I mean, from what you're saying, the FOMO effect is really, really strong with accelerators.
Absolutely.
You know,
if you're in the right accelerator, the FOMO effect can be really, really important, right? You know, I often say if you get into YC, you're probably going to raise a few million, right? It doesn't always happen.
That doesn't mean that your company is going to be successful. It just
doesn't mean your company is going to be successful either, right? Raising money and being successful are not the same thing. Right?
We've seen that.
Absolutely. But in order to become successful, raising money is,
it's important. You need capital. Yeah.
But it's interesting. You talked about that kind of stats. Some really interesting facts here is that, for example, some very well-known companies were launched through business incubators. So Dropbox and Airbnb was launched through a business incubator, right? And actually, found a statistic for you, an estimated 40% of startups seeking investments receive investment from a direct incubator program connection, right? So about 40% of startups seem to go through some form of incubator or accelerator. Doesn't mean they're all in YC, right? Because there's a lot of incubators and accelerators out there. But what that says to me is that it's a very valuable route for you to go through if you're an early stage company, just for all those reasons, right? It's like, if you want to learn, you go to school. Why do you go to school? There are other people there who you can learn alongside. And it's the most effective way to do it, right? So you can try and learn by yourself, but it's a difficult road.
Yeah. You don't want to reinvent the wheel because some of this stuff is well trodden. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Why should the problem, and the thing people ignore, the problem of reinventing the wheel is that you're just wasting your time because you're learning things that people have already learned. Just get someone else to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Just follow the script. Yeah.
Exactly. 100%.
I mean, it's something is that with Yom, I'm definitely considering the accelerator route. Yeah. Right. And so in choosing an accelerator, what sort of things should a founder look for when deciding to go with this accelerator or that accelerator? How do you determine the best fit for your own startup?
I think look at the types of startups that typically get accepted to that accelerator. Check that your type of organization is well suited, because every accelerator will have its own team, will have mentors and advisors that support that group, and they will have skills, and they will have verticals that they're best suited for. So if you're a fintech startup joining an accelerator that seems to largely cater to medtech startups, it's probably not the best place for you, because they won't have the experts who will help you with your sales strategy, your growth strategy, your funding model, your pitch deck, all of it, so that's really important. The other thing I would say is actually talk to people who've been through those accelerator programs and see how they found it, because different accelerators have very different experiences, right? And even things, and to be clear as well, if you come from an underrepresented background, the research shows that even underrepresented founders in accelerators can have pretty negative experiences. I know a few accelerators have reached out to me and said they typically find, especially Black entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs in their accelerators, tend to leave earlier, or tend to give them feedback, which is, I didn't feel supported within this accelerator. And I've seen it as well. I won't name names, but I spoke to a specific accelerator, and as under the guise of Impact X, I wanted to speak to diverse founders, right? Let me introduce me to diverse founders in your cohort. They're like, great, we will do. Introduced me to a whole bunch of really interesting founders. Some of them were definitely not diverse. And I'm like, why am I speaking to this team? I don't really understand. And then afterwards, I got speaking to a Black female founder of a startup, just talking. And then it turned out she was at this accelerator. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you were at this accelerator? No one even told me about you. When were you there? And she told me when she was there. And it coincided with that moment when I asked this team to introduce me to their founders. And I was just stunned. She'd been there the whole time and they hadn't told me about this person. Instead, they introduced me to some white male founders, which completely don't fit the remit that Impact X is looking for. And, no surprise, she chose to leave that accelerator. Interestingly, they were one of the accelerators that reached out to me, and they're a very well-known accelerator, reached out to me asking for help and advice on how they can help retain Black talent. And I'm like, well, it's quite easy. Make sure you introduce them to the right people when they ask to be introduced. So it's things like that you've got to be really careful about. So have a look at the types of startups that they support, do your research, speak to people who've been in those programs, and find out what experience they've had. And then finally, see if you can get any numbers on actual success rates of those companies. What have they gone on to do? Have they raised more money? Have they become unicorns? Have they exited? Have they become sustainable businesses? What have been the outcomes for those businesses? And then, you know, from that, you can make a decision. But I think we're almost out of time on that. So what about everything you've heard? Incubators, accelerators, right for you?
Yeah, I think, yeah. So for me, I think I'm a bit late in the day for an incubator. And to be honest, it's not the route that I had envisaged when we started Yom. So, but the accelerator sounds exciting. Yeah. And I've actually started that process already, and I've been speaking to a few accelerators actually. So it's something that we'll probably look to do once we've finished the funding round. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So definitely excited about, the working in that space and seeing some of the other founders and hearing their journeys as well, because I think it's just an invaluable experience. Yeah.
Brilliant. So, well, some examples of some accelerators for anyone who's listening. These are ones you should think about. You've got Startup Bootcamp, you've got Entrepreneur First, Y Combinator, obviously, 500 Startups, Techstars, NFX. Some of these are US based, like NFX, but you know, they might have programs over here. Antler is another one. Bethnal Green Ventures, great one, especially if you come from a diverse background. Distill Ventures, and Wayra, which I know very well because a good friend of mine, Gary Stewart, used to run it. So, and they're the Telefonica accelerator. So there you go. There's some
is that Techstars or is that TechNation? TechNation.
Oh, and TechNation. Yeah, I forgot about TechNation as well. They have their own accelerator program. And obviously we've got Code Untapped is acting more as an incubator. So, you know, it's kind of dabbling in that space. So watch Code Untapped as well. So I think that's it for today's program, guys, or everybody, team out there. So look, I think, as always, it's been brilliant catching up with you, Jay, and talking to everybody about what we're doing and what you're doing. For those people who are listening, you know, please watch this space. As I said, our next one should be to do with Andy Davis. You know, he's a superstar in the VC world, so keep an eye out for that.
Most definitely.
And he's just a good guy as well. So, and also, look, we would love to know what you think. So please do leave a review if you've listened to one of our podcasts or watched one of our YouTube videos. And for today, that's it from me. Jay, anything from you?
Well, I usually say carry on coding, but just carry on the good fight and getting your startup to where you want it to be.
Carry on building, right? I think that's right.
Carry on building. Carry on building. Yeah.
Fantastic. Take care, everyone, and see you next time.
Cheers, guys.